Do you ever feel like you're eating emotionally, like you're overwhelmed with life and then you head for the potato chips, or feeling sad and lonely and then head to the refrigerator for some ice cream? If so, then you may know the fix for this eating is typically to manage your emotions, deal with whatever is upsetting you and to manage your anger or frustration, and also to get away from the food triggers. But this might be the exact opposite of what you need to do. Stay tuned to find out about another type of eating that can cause problems with eating and weight, a type of eating that needs an entirely different fix. Today, we're going to look at that other type of eating that will wreak havoc on eating and weight. Most people who contact me for help with eating problems say that they eat emotionally. And when I was first doing this work, I believed that they were emotional eaters as well. And I would treat them as one would treat somebody who's eating emotionally. And in fact, I thought I was an emotional eater as well when I initially started doing my nutrition stuff when I was in school for my degree. And so I went to therapy to try to work on all my emotional issues, which I'm sure was helpful. But it didn't ultimately help me to fix my eating because it wasn't actually emotional eating that was causing the problem. But before we talk about that, let's take a quick peek at emotional eating because that's the eating that we do to help relieve emotional discomfort. And I divide emotional eating into two kind of main categories to help understand it. That eating that we do to push something down, and that eating that we do to fill something up. Okay? Sometimes if we eat emotionally, we might be pushing down anger or frustration or fear or sadness. We might be trying to push down stress. You know, when life starts getting overwhelming and it feels like we're just up to here with everything. And then sometimes we can eat and it'll just kind of push those emotions back down. Unfortunately, we're not dealing with them. We're just kind of parking them for a little while with some food. Also, unmet needs. If you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not getting enough rest, if you're not asking for people to support you, for instance, to pitch in around the house, then those unmet needs will probably be leading to negative feelings, and you will be eating in regards to that as well. The other type of emotional eating is filling something up. And that is when, for instance, we want to fix a broken heart or a pained heart, and it just feels like an empty space, and we eat to kind of try to fill it up. Unfortunately, that's not the fix as well, so we have to keep eating to continue to try to fill that up. We might also eat to fill up and to feel comfort in some way, or to fill space so that we don't feel so bored in life. All of these things are emotional eating. What I discovered is that 80 to 90% of my clients were not doing this. They were not truly eating emotionally. The number was more like 10 to 20%, believe it or not. Just 10 to 20% were eating emotionally. Unfortunately, in my early years, I would give lists like this, tips for dealing with emotional eating, such as, well, keep a food journal. Oh, that's a good idea for a number of reasons. But if your problem is not emotional eating, then you're fixing the wrong thing. You know, deal with your stress, get support, fight boredom, all these things. Take away temptation. There you go. Get rid of the trigger, right? Um, Eat healthy, snack healthy, get rid of the trigger. Learn from setbacks, learn from your mistakes. But the most interesting one, I found this little list off the internet. The most interesting one for me is number 7, don't deprive yourself. And that deserves a whole website into itself because that is part and parcel to this other part of eating that causes struggle, and that is deprivation driven eating. And in fact, 80 to 90% of my clients are deprivation driven eaters. I myself was also a deprivation driven eater, even though I was trying to fix all the emotions. It never got fixed. It never got fixed until I was able to identify and then start dealing with the deprivation. Now, deprivation driven eating is of two kinds. The first kind is physical, and the second kind is psychological. And physical deprivation, as you might guess, is not getting enough food. For instance, if you didn't eat enough breakfast and you didn't quite eat enough lunch, and now you've had a really decent dinner and you're full and you have a decent dinner, your belly's nice and full, and you go and you sit down in front of the TV just to chill out a little bit, and then you start thinking about all the little foods in the kitchen. Oftentimes the junk foods, what's in there, the junk foods, the ice creams or the chips or the cookies, or, let me just anything. Let me get some peanut butter and apple. I just want some food. I'm eating emotionally. I had a good dinner. I'm eating emotionally. But if you take a look at the whole day, there was a little deprivation earlier on at breakfast, at lunch, and then you had a decent dinner, and that still sits in your belly nice and full. But your body is in a state of deprivation. Your body knows it didn't get enough fuel for the day, and it's asking for more fuel. And in another example, if you didn't eat enough 2 days ago, most people think they think the body works just like MyFitnessPal. If I ate this much and I burned these calories on this day, this is exactly what's going to happen to my weight. It doesn't work that way. So the body will rectify calories over several days. So, well, for instance, have you ever exercised a lot one day and you weren't really that much hungrier after that? And then maybe another day where you were exercising and dang, you got home and you were hungry, right? How come you were hungry on one day after exercise but not the other? It's because it doesn't all add up on one day. So if you exercised nice and heavy like 2 days ago or yesterday, you may need more fuel today. And if you don't eat it because you're like, well, I didn't exercise, I'm not going to eat anymore, you are actually then in a state of deprivation. And you are setting yourself up to want more fuel. Okay? So it's that state of deprivation that causes an interest in food, causes actual food cravings and food preoccupation, and might feel exactly like emotional eating. So what does deprivation look like? It might surprise you. Here's a nice dinner. I have a lot of clients who will say that they ate a nice piece of salmon and asparagus and tomatoes, and look how lovely this dinner is. And I look at it and go, that wasn't enough food. This dinner is not enough food. Unless you ate a lot the rest of the day, this dinner is likely going to contribute to deprivation. And then you might think, well, that's ridiculous, Karen, because I've done this many times and I'm fine. Many times I've eaten this and I've been absolutely fine. And you can be for a little while. We can push away the deprivation, but if you are under eating, that deprivation will catch up with you and it will start getting louder and louder and louder until it becomes hard to ignore. And that is what's so tricky about deprivation-driven eating, is you have to kind of ferret it out. You have to investigate it to find it. It's helpful to work with a dietitian who knows how to do hunger and fullness work, and who can get into your hunger and fullness patterns and match them to your caloric intake. So if a client is showing me that this is their dinner and they ate similarly the rest of the day, I'm concerned. Now let's take a look at this day. Would you say most likely that this would be a sufficient amount of calories and fuel for your day in order to avoid physical deprivation-driven overeating? Let's take a look at it. Breakfast, a half a cup of cooked oatmeal, cup of skim milk, half a cup of blueberries. There you go. Your lunch would be a turkey sandwich with 2 ounces of turkey, lettuce, and tomato. It would have an orange and a vanilla yogurt. In the afternoon, you're going to have an apple and a bag of potato chips. And then for dinner, you'll have 4 ounces of baked chicken, a cup of rice, a cup of steamed broccoli, a dinner roll, and a half a cup of strawberries. And then shortly before bed, you'll have 6 Oreo cookies and a cup of skim milk. Now, when you look at this amount of food, what do you think? If you're like my clients, the majority of you are probably thinking, well, that's a lot of food. That's well more than enough food. That should be plenty. And in fact, this day would meet the needs of about 50% of my clients. In other words, if you're eating this much food, you have a 50-50% chance of avoiding physical deprivation-driven eating. Because 50% of people will need more fuel than this. This is not enough food for at least 50% of my clients. Okay, they need to actually eat more than this. Now, let me give you another example. We are going to add to that exact same day, we're going to add 2 pieces of toast and 2 teaspoons of butter at breakfast. For the snack, we're going to have a couple Dove chocolates in addition. And then we're going to take away the strawberries at dinner, and we're going to add a piece of strawberry shortcake. And then in the evening, we're going to have the 6 Oreo cookies, the cup of skim milk, and the half a cup of ice cream. Now, what would you say when you looked at this day? Should be fine, right? It's plenty of food. You're not going to be deprived if you eat this food. But what if I told you this is the exact intake of a client that I had that had been in therapy for years, suffering with binge eating, who had in her mind that she was supposed to eat like the last slide, and that when she started eating like this, she was still not eating enough. And for years and years and years, she was binge eating because she did not realize how much food she actually needed to get through the day. And in fact, this day, if she ate like this, she would lose weight. If she ate like this consistently, she would lose weight because it's not enough food. And then she wouldn't lose weight because the body would go, hello, we're starving here. Please give us some food. And then she would end up eating. And unfortunately, she would often overeat at that point. So it was a cycle. Now, guess what? If you added a decent sized piece of chocolate cake to this day, a decent sized piece, not a little sliver, a decent sized piece, then you would have her maintenance day. That's how much she needs to eat on a given day. So while she's an exception, she is not the only one. I've had many clients that need this amount of food in order to be able to meet their needs and to avoid binging and just to feel satisfied and to be able to kind of be at a status quo homeostasis within their body. And so it's important to begin to understand whether or not what you're doing is actually emotional or physical deprivation, because the fixes are very different. And I would hope that if it's physical deprivation, you wouldn't beat yourself up. If it's emotional eating, you might say, oh, like I'm just so weak-willed, I just can't handle my emotions, and here I am eating. If it's actually deprivation, you can literally go, oh, okay, I underate today. That is why I'm craving food. That is why I'm sitting here thinking about food in the kitchen right now. And then you have you can decide what you want to do with it. Perhaps you want to get up and have a little something and take care of it. Perhaps you're like so tired, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go to bed. But I do know that I'm actually going to be a little bit even hungrier tomorrow. But I'm going to deal with it tomorrow. But it's not because you're weak-willed. It's just because you're underfueled. Now, the second type of deprivation-driven eating is psychological. And I call that I can't, I won't, I shouldn't, I will today, but I won't tomorrow eating. Basically, deprivation-driven eating stems from that whole mentality. I can't, I won't, I shouldn't. I will today, but I won't tomorrow. When you believe those things about food, or that that's the way you need to be to manage your food intake, it can so backfire, causing you to want to eat more. And if you think about it, if I told you, here, you can have this one thing, I'm leaving, goodbye, here it is, this tasty thing, but I want to tell you that you can never eat that again. Never eat it again. It's basically because you're kind of, you need some improvement. You need some improvement. This is how we're going to prove you. You won't eat that ever again after today. So see you later. Just throw that in the garbage, whatever, bye. Do you think you're going to throw that yummy in the garbage when you know you can't ever have it again? Probably not. You're probably going to eat it. And you might even then go home and eat even more because you feel like I've already blown it. I will today, but I won't tomorrow, right? So deprivation stems from the idea that I can't have that food, I shouldn't have that food, I won't eat that food, but dang it, if I'm going to do it, I might as well just go for it, and then I'll promise myself I'll never do it again, and I won't do it tomorrow for sure. That's deprivation-driven eating. And so in the previous example with the physical deprivation-driven eating, if you, for instance, didn't eat enough at breakfast, that example, didn't eat enough at lunch, and had a decent dinner, nice, solidly full, but your body's like, oh, I know we're kind of full, but let's just go up a little higher on the fuel and on the hunger index because I need a little bit more fuel. And then you're like, oh, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. Oh, dang it. And off you are into the kitchen. You're getting the food. Are you just going to get 2 cookies and go sit down? Or are you going to go, well, you know what? I blew it. I might as well keep going. If you're doing that part, that's psychological deprivation eating. Okay? I can't, I shouldn't. Well, I might as well. I'm going to go for it. And there's always hidden deep down in there somewhere, and I won't do it tomorrow. I have clients who say, no, I don't do that anymore. Like, I let myself eat whatever I want. But a few questions later, what we find is deep down there, there's still that layer of, yeah, but. Your clients will come see me and they'll start working on this. And what we have to kind of unpack is, are they going, okay, I'll try this, but if it doesn't work, I know I can just go back to Weight Watchers. It's fine. So that's still, like, I can't, I won't, I shouldn't, I will today, but I won't tomorrow. That's still part of that thing, because I'm going to try it now, but I can, later, I'm probably going to go back to that other program, and then I won't be allowed to eat it. So you're still not free, and you're still stuck with a deprivation-driven eating. So that is the psychological aspect of it. And people will say to me, Karen, you're wrong. You're wrong because, I was at the office and my boss called me in and, I was scared. And before I went, I was eating. It's obviously emotional. And what I say to that is, look at their food intake. I'm thinking that's not enough food to get you through the day. And what happens when you're eating in a way that it's not enough food to get you through the day, your food has to be clamped down. You have to have a certain amount of energy holding your food together. That energy is going to be like this. So there's your resolve, and here's your energy to kind of keep it here so that you just you ignore it. You're careful when you go to the grocery store. You've got it going. You're doing really good. You kind of got it going on, but there's a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of monitoring, a certain amount of tension around all this that you're doing, right? And then when the boss calls you in and you don't know quite if it's good news or bad news, the energy that is holding your resolve together is now like, uh-oh, oh no, what's going on? What's going on? And the energy is now distracted. It just got ripped away. You had nothing to do with it. It just got ripped away. And then what happens here? The resolve breaks away and you're in the middle of the food. Now, if you had not have been doing this, if this had been free to deal with life, it would have just gone, uh-oh, and there wouldn't have been a reaction around the food. Okay, so I consider this deprivation-driven eating because had you not been in a state of restriction, a state of underfueled to begin with, there would not have been this breaking out. This would have been not there, and your emotions would have been free just to deal with it. That is why the cause of it was not actually caused by emotions to deal with your emotions. The cause was actually you were in a state of deprivation that required a certain amount of time and energy and effort to contain. That energy and effort got ripped away, and now the deprivation is broken out. So that is why I think that is not actually emotional eating. Let's take a look comparing. They're so similar that it's hard to know just by looking at them. For instance, both emotional deprivation driven have food cravings and food preoccupations. They both involve binging, usually on junk foods. They both involve guilt and shame around the eating. They both try to avoid the bad foods and try to only eat the good foods. But the food cravings can be decoded in an emotional eater, but not in a deprivation-driven eater. And by that, I mean the food cravings aren't really about I'm in a state of deprivation and I need more fuel, or I'm in a state of mental deprivation because I've not been allowed to eat that and dang it, I want it and I'm going to go get it. it's just really simple and clean that way. For the emotional eater, a craving can actually be about something underlying and deeper. For instance, um, you know, when I have a client that is constantly wanting to eat crunchy foods, whether it's an apple, perhaps if somebody's anorexic, maybe they'll do this with an apple, or maybe somebody else will do it with another type of food, crunchy food. Then I wonder if that person is dealing with some anger. So there's a lot of decoding that can be done to look at what is happening underneath emotional, but not so much if it's deprivation. The emotional eater is more likely to not feel full after eating a lot because the emotional eater is more likely to go into that numbed state. But the deprivation driven eater can do that also. So it's not a defining characteristic. Eating to numb, soothe, please, relax, and reward. Certainly that seems like the place of emotional eating, but a deprivation driven eater can also do that as well. And the weight typically fluctuates. And this is important because people will say to me, oh, my daughter, well, actually, I had a young woman who had 3 girls, and one of the girls was eating a voraciously large amount of food. Just would wanted to eat before dinner. Would eat before dinner and then would eat at dinner, and just constantly eating, constantly eating. And she came to me to consult with me to find out how she could help her daughter manage this kind of emotional eating that she was doing. And I asked her, I said, is your daughter staying steady on the growth curve? She says, well, yeah. I said, has her weight spiked up at all recently in the last months? And she said, no, not at all. And then she just kind of looked at me. She goes, oh my God, you're telling, I didn't tell her, she figured it out. You're telling me that she is just eating that much because that's what she needs. And her weight is just doing exactly what it's supposed to do. She's not overeating. And I said, that's right. She's not overeating. And that can happen for adults as well. You know, they're not on a growth curve, but their weight will be steady state. So it's one of the questions that I ask when a client comes in. I'll have a fat body client come in, and obviously I'm eating wrong. Obviously I'm emotional eating. Look at me, you know, and I'm like, look at their eating and weight history. And I'm like, your weight's been stable for the last 15 years. Yeah, but, you know, I'm too big. I'm eating emotionally. No, you're actually not. Your weight is stable. You're not eating enough to create an overage to cause weight gain. So you are not eating, well, you might be eating emotionally. Everybody eats emotionally. Let's just go there, okay? Everybody eats emotionally. You know, when, you know, you might have that favorite food you return to when you're stressed out, that thing that mom used to cook for you. Doesn't mean you're overeating it. Doesn't mean it's a problem, okay? So maybe this person is eating emotionally, but is it really a problem if they're doing it once in a while and their weight is stable? So the bottom line is that you may not need to work through all those feelings to fix what's going on around your food and eating. You may need to start looking at whether or not you're actually fuel deprived and whether or not you're judging yourself around your food and eating. This judgment is probably the most important aspect of this because I have clients that their food does not get cleaned up. They don't like get rid of the eating struggles until the judgment goes. And when that judgment goes, it's amazing. They still eat really healthy, but without the judgment, they're free to navigate around how much they need and what they want to eat and what they want to buy in a way that allows them to have that freedom that they've been seeking. In the next module is a PDF called Eating Styles Compared. And in it, you're going to see some of the characteristics of emotional eating and deprivation-driven eating, as well as some tips and techniques of each of those to help you kind of learn more about them and work on healing them as well. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next modules. Thanks.